Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Virgo eclipse. I've already done videos on this, approaching this eclipse and talking about it in general. So you can find those on my channel. And there's also a discussion I did last August with Bukola, which was excellent. And we were talking a lot about the dynamics between Virgo and Pisces. So if you want to know more about that, watch again. And if you're new to my channel, hello, I'm Susan. Even if you're not new to the channel, I'm still Susan, and hello. And I'm very glad you're here with me. I'm just sharing what I understand about the moment, the present moment, and the Mercury retrograde that goes with this eclipse cycle, which is really quite literally the messenger of this eclipse cycle and something we really want to pay attention to. So I normally don't do videos for Mercury retrograde because I think it's a bit overblown in the social media age. I do feel very strongly that there's a lot of conflation of things going wrong with Mercury retrograde, and we have to get used to not blaming things for when things go wrong in our lives, and just recognizing that things happen because of a number of different component parts that are not working towards the end that we desired. And one of those things that corrects the challenge, let's say, around a Mercury retrograde is mindfulness and being aware of what is going on. And often in our busy days, we're not really mindful of what is going on. So a lot of the things that we tend to put in the category of that's not my fault, that's Mercury retrograde, it's because we weren't paying attention. And it's really helpful, especially right now, to pay close attention. But it's not like the everyday type of attention that's really important at this stage in our evolution collectively and then individually. It's really about understanding the desire that we have to move forward, which in this particular moment is really loud around Venus moving between Aries and Pisces. I've already done videos on Venus, and I'll be talking about her again in the next few weeks because it's a really big part of what we're all experiencing for the next couple of months. But Venus and Mercury together are creating a dynamic of trying to understand what's going on in this moment in time. And Mercury is also known as the psychopomp. And what that means is it's the planet that was, or the god, that the messenger god that was going to take the message from the gods or the spirit world and bring it down to the human. And what that really means is it's kind of like listening to your heart. So if we think of this not as an abstraction or some other place where there are these gods doing these things, and then there's down here, little old us doing our things, but rather within us, there's the spirit realm or the awareness of who we are. And that you could equate with our heart and the mind, which is also reflected as the moon in the natal chart or in the astrology, is the center of the heart. In the tradition of India, for example, and many other traditions, consider that the heart itself is the seat of our mind. And Mercury is very much that process of understanding what's in the mind. And so it takes that nugget of intuition, or what we understand from what we could call spiritual realms, and brings it to our conscious awareness, which is the mentalization and the thought process and the communication around that, what we could associate with the more mundane or human realms. And this is the psychopomp. This is the action of Mercury. And Mercury is moving back and forth quite often during a year. It's usually 3 times that it's retrograde. That's one of the reasons I don't give it a whole lot of attention, because it's not a really outstanding passage. It's not something, again, I think again, there's a lot of clickbait. I don't monetize my channel, so the moment you see clickbait on my channel is the moment you should just unsubscribe and move along, because I don't want your attention at all costs. I just want to tell you what seems to be important according to what I feel. And I know my time is as valuable as yours, and I don't want to drop every single movement of every single planet in the sky. However, here we're talking about a very different Mercury retrograde. So this cycle of Mercury, along with Venus, is quite life-defining, and it sounds a little bit clickbaity to say something like that, but it really is a pivotal time in our personal lives and in our humanity. So it's something I wanted to draw to your attention. I'm going to be giving you a lot of dates because this is a process that's already underway since February. And I'm going to give you a bunch of dates, and you can either write them down, or I'm going to put these dates in the description box. There's a description box below the video. And if you click on that, you'll get all my details, and I'd be delighted if you'd like to have a reading. That's where you'll find the details for the reading. That's where you find out that this is tropical astrology and not Vedic astrology, and all the other little details about whatever the video is about on the day. And I'll pin it in the first comment for those of you who have such difficulty finding that damn description box. And I will also post it to Instagram for anybody who follows me there. You're very welcome to follow me there. Again, I don't post very much. I'm not really much about I'm not a great social media person. Um, Not because I don't love you, I do, but not enough to keep posting as often as I probably should. But nonetheless, let's go on this journey knowing that you either can pencil in your own list of the dates that I'm going to point out, or that the list of dates is coming for those of you who really prefer to see things kind of written down. And honestly, this time around, you'll definitely want that. And in the meantime, try and get the gist of what I'm saying here, because this is really about a personal evolution that is quite powerful. And the more conscious we can be in terms of that mercurial awareness, the more we can evolve in a way that is based on listening properly to our intuition and working appropriately towards the thing that we want based on that intuition and what Mercury brings then to our conscious awareness as the cycle pump. Right, so we're going to start with the new moon of September 2023. So we're going back a year and a half, 18 months before this eclipse. There was a lunation that started off this particular lunar cycle. So in the context of the Mercury retrograde, whose dates I'll give you as well coming up, I want you to think overall about the eclipse cycle that we're in, and especially for this particular moment, and I'll talk about, again, the Aries eclipse later on. I've also done a video on that in a general sense a couple of days ago, and I'll do the side by side coming up soon. And I want you to think in terms of what changed in your life mid-September, I think it was the 15th of September of 2023, and how this is being reflected right now. And what Mercury is going to help you understand, since Mercury was the ruler of that lunation and is the ruler of this eclipse. Mercury rules Virgo, and the eclipse itself, coming up within hours of me speaking to you here, is ruling Virgo where the moon is, because it's a full moon. That makes it a lunar eclipse, and it's total. That's because it's very close. Both the sun and the moon, which are in opposition, giving us that full moon, are very close to the nodal axis, and in this case also with Saturn. So Mercury itself is important, not just because it's going retrograde a day after, just a little bit less than 24 hours after this eclipse, Mercury stations retrograde, but also because it's ruling the south node and the lunation. So Mercury is ruling the south node from the 11th or so of January 2025 all the way through the end of July 2026. So it will continue to play a major role. And on the other end, where we have the north node, Jupiter will continue to play a major role. And I'll talk about Jupiter in a moment, but everything in its time. Mercury, by the way, is ruling Jupiter, just for good measure. So what I wanted to say in a general sense, before we get into the nitty-gritty, is that everybody is concerned. So that means that although really from the beginning of the year through late May, or even right through the end of the summer, we're really looking at Pisces and Aries, and most especially from February to the end of May, we're looking really at the last 10 degrees of Pisces. So from roughly 20 degrees of Pisces to the very last degree. And from the very beginning of Aries to the 12th or even 13th degree, if we give it a 2-degree orb in terms of the Venus retrograde station, which is at 10 degrees, 50 minutes of Aries. If you have anything between 20 degrees of Pisces and say 13 degrees of Aries, you are you're in for a really major shift in your life. And especially so if these are personal planets or points in your chart. For example, your ascendant, your descendant, your midheaven, or the IC. Those points are life-changing points because they create kind of the backbone of your chart. And that's the things that change the most radically are when you have a passage of importance, especially an eclipse around those points. So because Mercury rules this eclipse, the points of the retrogradation are very important. And like a bridge, it's also it's coming back to reference the eclipse of the 29th of March. And I'll keep coming back and forth and showing how that degree is activated again, going beyond the 29th of March. So the general gist of this moment in time is to use that internal guidance, which is reflected currently by the moon, which is full, and that brings something to our awareness. It brings something to our attention. And the moon, remember, as I just said, it represents our internalization of what we know already. It's our instinctive nature. It can be considered our memory as well. It's the field of the mind that we become. There's a sensation that's associated with the moon. There's an instinctive knowing that is emerging physically. The moon represents the body as well. So what we feel is coming to our awareness, and Mercury starts to make sense of what we feel as a thought, and then how we communicate that thought. And so all of these things are tying in to a questioning around our identity, or the vision that we hold for ourselves as an individual, which is Aries, and our preferences, because we've already seen that Venus is very much a part of this dynamic as well, and pretty much tagging Mercury the whole way through, or it's Mercury more like tagging Venus. It's kind of like, wait, you forgot your phone, and he goes, tries to follow Venus back into Pisces, never quite reaches her. They don't quite conjunct, except they already did 2 days ago. So at 8 degrees of Aries, Venus and Mercury conjoined each other, which is very close to this very special 9-degree point that we're going to see again and again highlighted between now and the end of April, and even into May. And so they're not entirely on the same page, but they're close to it. So they're informing each other, helping each other, working with each other to get information through. And the information is about, what do I want going forward? And is this working for me in terms of what I understand about the greater purpose of my life, or the sense of what life is? And that's that Piscean quality of understanding the truth of our nature, not our individual self, which is more the Aries quality, but the collective life that we're experiencing here, and how do we want to participate in that. So we have this collective journey, an individual journey, and then a lot of questioning around this particular moment that requires a certain amount of quietude. And I do always recommend that when we come through an eclipse, that there's not a whole lot going on. So like today, we're coming up to the eclipse, I did lots of laundry. I changed my bedding. I freshened things up like a little mini spring clean. And I prepare myself not to eat during the hours of the eclipse. So I tend to fast, including a water fast. I don't take anything. That's entirely up to you what you do. This is not medical advice for the Americans out there, the litigious among you. This is where you will want to go inward and go as quiet as you can. And so this eclipse is actually happening at almost 7 a.m. Universal Time. And so for the East Coast people, that will be 5 hours back. If you are in the US, Canada, and I don't know, Brazil, I think also shares that time zone. I can't remember. But if you'll know your time zone, let's go 5 hours back for the East Coast time, bringing you to 2 a.m. So if you're a late sort of a night owl, or if you feel like you want to stay up and be in this energy and be conscious in that energy, you might like to stay up and meditate at that time. Just sit up in bed, or just before you go to bed, just set an intention and sit quietly with yourself. And then when you wake up in the morning, also sit quietly and don't jump on the phone, and don't eat during an eclipse cycle. So that For the East Coast and many of you in the United States and Canada, South America, and so on, that'll be pretty easy. For Australians, maybe not so much. Your Australian, New Zealand crowd, the far east of Asia, you will be in the middle of your day. So just notice, ideally around the time of the eclipse, you don't want to eat. Try and avoid that. And so if you're in Pacific time, for example, this is a brilliant opportunity because it's your evening time anyway. So you could really sit with the energy and be quiet until going into bedtime. Those of us waking up to the eclipse, we just ideally we can wake up just a little bit before and then sit at around that time sitting in silence. And the eclipse you can find if you go to timeanddate.com, great website. They'll show you all the things you need to know about the eclipse. And we will, almost all of us, see some aspect of this eclipse. It's quite broad. When an eclipse is total, it often has a really wide range of effects. So if you've got a clear sky, you'll be able to see it. If it's daytime, it's not going to be so clear because it's a lunation and that requires darkness. So that might be something that you can only catch a little bit of before you go to bed or when you wake up. Nonetheless, it's going to affect us all astrologically speaking, because there's not one sign that doesn't have something going on in connection to this eclipse. And I'm just going to explain why through the rulership cycle before we go back to the dates here. So we have Aries, which is a focal point right now. That's where Mercury is about to station retrograde on the 15th of March. Venus has already stationed retrograde. And that is ruled by Mars. And by the way, this new eclipse coming, the new moon eclipse, which is a solar eclipse that's at the 29th of March, is also here at this point in Aries and also wrapping up 2 years going back to April 2023. So if you're looking at that September 2023 point, you might even want to just go right back to April and see how much has shifted in your life through this particular couple of years that we've been very, very particular couple of years that we've been going through. So why I'm saying that is because Mars rules Aries and Mars is in Cancer. And I'm not going to go too much into the details of it. It's not terribly comfortable in Cancer because it brings up a lot of emotionality, which this eclipse can contain as well. And I have given many more details in my previous, I think maybe 2 weeks ago, I did an eclipse for all signs for the lunar eclipse, or rather a video for all signs for the lunar eclipse here in Virgo. But the key thing here is that the moon, which is the big sort of celebrity of this particular lunation, the eclipse being a full moon eclipse, therefore the moon is the one that we're looking at, it's ruled by Mars. And that Mars, oh, there's my mindfulness bell for those of you who want to take a breath. Inhaling, nice slow deep breath, and then exhaling. I've got this set for every hour after the quarter hour. So Mars is ruled by the moon, and we saw earlier that the moon is ruled by Mercury. So these three tie in a very impactful way just right now. And this is because there's again this moment in time where it's really helpful for us to understand our impulses, our instinctive nature, our deepest desires. The moon represents our sort of heart's desire, what it is that we really feel, and what is the soul urge coming through us. And because Mars is there, not in super great dignity, it can be very edgy, it can be very emotional, and to the extent that it can be very reactive. So Virgo energy can be very reactive because there's often a lot of defensiveness, and defensiveness is definitely a key word for Mars in Cancer as well, because there's an emotional sort of protective quality to that. There's a defensiveness that can come through a sensitivity, emotional sensitivity, or a feeling of insecurity. And a similar kind of feeling can come through Virgo, where there's a certain amount of anxiety for the future, anxiety about outcomes, anxiety about how things are going to be. It's not an easy time for Virgos, having said that, because this is a really chop and change kind of period of time in our life where we can't foretell here, as I'm talking to you on the 13th of March, just the day before this eclipse. Who knows what's coming up? I'm pretending to know at this moment. I'm just showing what I think is going to happen, but who knows, really? Again, only time will tell. And the unfolding of events is partly due to how we respond to things, but also how we don't respond to things, how we let things move in their own cycle. And Virgo has a hard time with that, the letting go, letting things move in their own way. And this can be something to really contemplate, really let go. Where can I see the letting go is going to be beneficial for me? Where can I see that I create my own anxiety, or that the anxiety that's inherent in me comes from a pattern of thinking I need everything to look a particular way? And where can I go more towards that Piscean flow, and that the generation of this energy that we're in this cycle is to move in that direction. It's generating this confidence and this faith in the letting go process, in the sense that the universe is it has a logic to it that the human mind cannot understand. Now, Venus is the exaltation ruler of Pisces, but she's also the ruler of Taurus, where we find Uranus, which is also in a sextile to Saturn and the Sun at the time of this eclipse, as well as in the seventh house, where we find Virgo. So if you are Taurus or Virgo, this will also affect you in that part of your chart where, whether it's Taurus, Sun, Moon, or Rising, Libra, Sun, Moon, or Rising, as Venus herself is retrograding and is participating very, very much so in these next few weeks of this eclipse cycle. So this story is also your story, even though we're paying attention to all of this energy here. And then Venus being the exaltation ruler of Pisces, we also have the actual ruler of Pisces, which is Jupiter. And Jupiter also rules Sagittarius. So yes, Sagittarius, you also are very much implicated in this by rulership, because your ruler is in this, mixed in this story by the connection that it has, even at this moment, though it's not direct. It will be 2 weeks' time from now, and into April becomes much more directly connecting with all of these different points that we're seeing now. But just know that all of this change is also your life changing, most especially in the areas represented by Venus and Aries and Pisces, as well as by Virgo and why am I forgetting you, Libra? Libra. If you go back in time, notice also those last 2 years has been a huge impact on Libra. And so again, this is part of the closing out of this dynamic that you've really gone through the last 2 years. So again, by rulership of Venus, it also pertains to the Venus-ruled signs of Taurus and Libra. And by rulership of Jupiter, it pertains to Pisces and Sagittarius. And by the Mars rulership of Aries, it also pertains, and I haven't mentioned you yet, Scorpio, but it also pertains to Scorpio. So there, again, there's something that you will all get energetically from this eclipse that you're learning from, and that requires some kind of adjustment, even if you have nothing in Aries and Pisces. Okay, so you all will have the sign of Aries and the sign of Pisces in your natal chart, and that will resonate through the rulerships and possibly also by oppositions and squares especially. Now, for example, I mentioned earlier the last 10 degrees of Pisces, which means that if you have something very strong in the last 10 degrees also of Virgo, especially where we find the South Node and the Moon, that in these next few months is really, really powerful. It's going to be very impacted, very deeply impacted in your life. And by extension, anything up to 12, 13 degrees of Aries, and by opposition, in the 12, 13 degree point of Libra, that's going to be hugely impacted as well. And for Libra particularly, and actually all of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, there was an eclipse back in October at 9-10 degrees of Libra, a new moon on the 2nd of October, that is also being called in with all of this activity in the degree exactly opposite that. So this is a big story that we're grappling with here, and it can make sense to you if you start going back in time and piecing together the different changes and things that have happened in your experience that have brought you to this new experience, and then it makes more sense going forward. I didn't mention the squares coming from the mutable signs. The mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. So by opposition, we spoke about the last 10 degrees of Pisces and the last 10 degrees of Virgo. But if you also have something in, now here's something different for the mutables. It's not just the last 10 degrees of Gemini or Sagittarius, but it's also because of the placement of Jupiter, it's also going to be very significant if you go from, let's say, 11 or 12 degrees of your sign, and especially including the last 10 degrees. So things will shift in ways that are not necessarily clear right now, but over the course of the next few weeks and certainly next 6 or so months, this will show up really, really clearly for you. And then we can't leave out the Saturn ruled signs. So, of course, we have Saturn itself with the Sun. And by the way, Sun is the ruler of Leo. So every eclipse, regardless of the sign that it's in, will affect Leos and Cancers because of the lunations being represented by the Sun and the Moon. So Leo, you're never off the hook in the lunation cycle, or certainly in the eclipse cycle. The Sun is always the king, always very important in everything that happens. It just so happens that the king is there with his not so bestie. He's there with Saturn. Luckily, both of these planets in Pisces have a kind of a neutral dignity. They're not too fast either way. They don't behave badly or particularly well. And so they're not doing too much damage to each other. We also have a trine, especially from Saturn, but also from the Sun to Mars, which is almost at 19 degrees. So this is 3, or let's say 4 or 5 degrees of a trine to the Saturn and Sun, who recently conjoined just on the 12th of March. And so kind of recharging Saturn in terms of the synodic cycle with the Sun, this annual cycle of the meeting with the Sun. But what that means is that there can be some doubt with Saturn on the Sun, a doubt around one's identity or purpose, because the Sun represents those things. And this, again, will be very particularly so for people who have the degree points between, say, 20 degrees of Pisces and 30 degrees of Pisces to the very end, where that is the topic. And then, of course, by opposition, the same degree points for Virgo, and by square for Gemini and Sagittarius. So you're questioning something about your purpose, your perhaps also your need to take responsibility for something, including your purpose, including your own self and your the way that you navigate life. Saturn can, especially in opposition to the Moon, can be a kind of a depressive energy. It can make things feel heavy. And I want you to keep reminding yourself that the journey of this lunation is also about reconsidering things. So that means that, again, it's important to question what you think is true, including your own thoughts. Don't trust your thoughts. Don't believe everything you think, as I said in the last video. And certainly don't trust what you hear. The dynamic of communication is listening as well as speaking. So the way that you might listen to information, are you filtering it through things that you already know or believe you know or think are true, rather than really listening and by meaning with the intent to learn something? Equally, we have Virgo, which is really all about discernment, and it's Mercury that helps us discern. And that need to discern that what is true from what is not true is not just what I feel is true. It's not like that thing about my truth. It's about what is objectively true here. And most of the time, and especially during retrograde times, and especially during eclipse times, we don't really have enough information. And Mercury retrograde is about gathering more information. It's about finding out what I need to know to be able to do X or Y, and do that with a sense of this is the right thing to do, the right thing for me to do. So take your time at this particular juncture to really question all of these things. Now, Mercury retrograde starts the day after this eclipse. So I'm going to switch from here, the actual eclipse. I'm going to go to the current transits, and we're just going to move forward, simply so I can keep track for myself of what I'm telling you. So it happens early morning. Maybe I'll just call up that chart because I think I have it here. Yeah, so the Mercury retrograde chart is for, again, almost 7 a.m. Universal Time. You add or take away from the time on the 15th of March. That's a Saturday for those of us here in Europe. It might be Friday for where you are. And that's the point. Notice the degree point at 9:35 of Aries, and the eclipse that's coming 2 weeks down the road is at 9 degrees exactly of Aries, and where Venus stationed was at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries. So I want you to just kind of keep that 9-ish, 10-ish degree point in mind as you consider what's coming up in terms of the next few weeks, because those degree points become very sensitive. The retrograde degree points as well as the eclipse points become very sensitive. Right. And so we have this journey of the retrograde. Now if we go back in time just a little bit, we can go back even to Valentine's Day. So February the 14th was when Mercury actually entered into Pisces, where it's ultimately going to be stationing retrograde. And it's going to station retrograde on, what is the date here? Let me double check that. It's going to station retrograde. I'm sorry, it is stationing retrograde. It's going to station direct near where the North Node is. And so that's 26 degrees of Pisces on the 7th. And that's a very strong activating point. But I'll tell you about that in a moment, because everything is intermingled at this time, and it actually we can feel it that way because so much is going on. There's so much happening, so much information, and so much stuff that makes no sense, where so-called leaders, for example, are behaving in ways that are entirely counterproductive, and where here in, let's say, the Western world, and I'm going to generalize and say all NATO leaders, all EU leaders, with a few rare exceptions, are they're drinking their own Kool-Aid, they're believing their own propaganda, and they're making choices that are tearing the fabric of our social and economic systems down in real time. And we see it. And so we're seeing also, and this is very Mercury retrograde, we're seeing a lot of things that are flipping. Who shall not be named, the President of the United States, is going back and forth on things that are of utmost importance and even global security, the utmost importance of life and death questions that he sort of flippantly throws out, and then all his little minions run after him and say, yes, sir, yes, yeah, well, let's do this, including the minions here in Europe who are supposed to be leaders of their own countries. It's just insane to watch for anyone who's old enough to remember how things used to be, at least ostensibly, with some kind of gravitas and dignity. That's out the window. So this is part of this journey that we're on at this moment. And because there's so much shape-shifting, ever since, particularly strongly since Mercury moved into Pisces, but all the way through its journey right out of Aries, you're going to have to just hold a space for not knowing. And that's, for some of you, going to be really difficult. For others, it's going to be the safety zone. It's going to be what allows you to say, okay, this is not going to last. And that's a good, maybe a motto to keep in mind. It's nothing lasts. Everything passes. Everything shifts. There's no emotion that lasts. No emotion is worth tormenting yourself over. They all shift and change constantly. And that is certainly the flux of the immersion, what we can learn from this retrograde. So if we come back to the 14th of February, the way I see this, Mercury entering into Pisces, which is the exaltation domain of Venus. She was already in Aries by that time. She's got other things to do. So Mercury is kind of like, in this interesting kind of tryst with Venus. It's like this fling that they're having for 3 months, basically February, March, April, really, really strongly, right into May, actually. And there's this back and forth about desire and what do I know? What do I want? And what do I need to understand or need to learn? What do I need to see realistically? This has been very helpful this week, as Saturn has been conjoining the Sun and helping make things more real, more tangible. It's kind of like a wake up to what is difficult or real, the thing that's grounding us, the everyday tangible material stuff of life, which is very important, regardless of how spiritual one thinks one is. We still have to brush our teeth and do the dishes, most of us. And so we have a lot to learn from this journey of Mercury since February. And Mercury is going to go back into that part of the chart. And as it's part of this nodal dynamic, it also is going to pull in not only its own rulership in conjunction now with all the planets that it already saw in February. It's already been through there and through the first part of March, but also it's going to pull in Jupiter because Mercury rules Jupiter. And it's now in Jupiter's territory, and the two of them are going to start communicating. Now, they're not in what we call a mutual exchange. They're in a sign-based exchange, or what could be called a mutual generosity, but it becomes much easier to understand things from a higher place because Mercury and Jupiter are connecting. And they're saying, look, there's a whole big picture here going on, and be careful of falling into the details. So Mercury is trying to find the vast understanding. Jupiter is trying to find a million details in Mercury's territory. So they can help each other out here. And because Mercury is retrograde, it requires us to reflect on things, to review things, to reconsider things. If we don't do this consciously, things will go messy around us. And that's when everybody says, oh, Mercury's retrograde and this happened. And it's like, no, you got to bring some more consciousness to this moment so that you can pull in the wisdom of Jupiter with the participation of Mercury. So when does Mercury go back into Pisces? Let's just go through the dates because I'm overwhelmed myself with all these dates. By the way, I have Neptune sitting on my Mercury. I'll be super relieved by the end of March when I finally just get, at least by a kind of a whiff of a degree, I get Neptune off my Mercury. Um, that's been a year, by the way. So if everybody's wondering why I can't finish a sentence, that's why. So listen, we've got Mercury going back over the Aries point, which is again one of the other super sensitive and significant points, and I'll just describe this in a moment, on the 30th of March. Guess what happens on the 29th of March? So that's the day again after the eclipse. So here we have Mercury retrograding on the day after the lunar eclipse on the 14th. And then again, it's going to be re-emerging or regressing back into Pisces, where it was since Valentine's Day. It's going back into Pisces on the 30th of March. Now, 10 hours later, it's going to change place with Neptune. So I'm going to have Mercury returning to my natal Mercury, and we'll get Neptune out into Aries. And nonetheless, all of those degrees, that last degree of Pisces, the first degree of Aries, is considered to be the Aries point. And that is this sort of imaginal space where we start anew, where there's a brand new cycle, the brand new zodiacal cycle, or for example, in terms of the 21st of March, when we have the spring equinox, or at least the vernal equinox, we have this energy of something new starting. That's the astrological new year, which is baked into this whole eclipse cycle, by the way. So that Aries point is just carrying a lot of weight, even though at this particular moment, it's still not showing up in our chart. So we get this now. Maybe I can show you that by chart if I have that one. Yes, I do. So here's Mercury retrograding. Now the chart has turned because I'm not putting the ascendant in, but when the sign of Aries is on the first house, it means that that is the ascendant in universal time. So the 30th of March, just literally a day after the 29th of March eclipse, here we have Mercury at 0 degrees. We have the very last minute of the very last degree of the zodiac where we find Neptune. Now I'm going to pause again and remind you that in this particular time, for these months and weeks and even the last couple of years, we can't be sure of information or what we think is true. We just don't know. And it's really important when you don't know to not judge or assess what is going on until you really feel you've got enough information, that you've done your research. Remember when it was toxic to say, do your own research? Remember when that was when you were shamed for wanting to do your own research about things? That wasn't so long ago. But do your own research. And don't research on the first page that Google gives you, but find information from people you don't like. This would be a good Venus retrograde with Mercury retrograde thing to do. That you separate out your preferences from what is true. And don't block yourself into this little bubble, because Mercury, when it's with Neptune, which it will be for much of the last week of March and the first week of April, despite them being in two different signs, is very confusing. And it's not easy to parse out what is true for me in this moment, what is real. We also have this quite extraordinary pileup of planets that's at the end of Pisces. And again, it mimics similarly, not exactly the same thing, but very close to what we had at the end of January and the beginning of February, where we had all those planets at the 27th, 28th degree of Pisces. Now, Neptune has moved on, Mercury's moving back, and what we will have then, and here I'm going to come up with oh, by the way, early April's actually quite nice. Like this all seems really dramatic right now, but there's so much opportunity in what I'm telling you here. I'll come back, sort of segment by segment to parse it all out. But the first week of April is wonderful. There's this little mini grand trine that is forming between Mars and Uranus and Saturn that's extremely constructive. We can see it already here at the end of March. It's building up, but it holds for the first week of April pretty much. That's really constructive. It's very helpful for getting things underway in a new way, new dynamic. And that's also the trine that we get even at the eclipse moment here that I'm talking about. If I come back to that chart, I can point it to you so you can visualize that, is that there is this very supportive trine, sorry, from the Uranus back to the moon. It's a sextile to the sun and Saturn, but that trine to the moon is a representation of insight and something that can change, things that are either emotional or things that are somehow stuck in your emotional body or the memory or your opinions or whatever it is, or your anxieties and fears. Uranus can help you shake that up. It can really change dynamically in a constructive way. Trines are supportive. Sometimes we need that kick up the backside that Uranus can provide to help us change our perspective on things. Um, and so this is just these couple of weeks coming ahead, because all that I've just described so far is really only with reference to up until the end of March. So Mars comes, as I said, it's retrograding back into, it's at the Aries point and retrograding back into Pisces on the 30th of March. And then it's going to station, and then it's going to station. Don't I have a chart for that? Maybe not. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'll do the transits and we'll get that station. On the 7th of April, Mercury will station, and that's its direct station point on the 7th. And so here we have Mercury at 26, almost 27 degrees, meaning that it's very, very close, within literally half a degree of the North Node, which is coming through again a point that was already significant to the eclipse that we are having right now. So the eclipse of the 13th, 14th of March is being highlighted again by the Mercury station. So Mercury is, like I said, the cycle pump that's pulling in information and sharing it back and forth. What do I need to know spiritually? What do I need to know about the collective? What do I need to know about this Pisces area of my chart? What do I need to have faith in? And what do I need to then bring out into the world where Aries is fresh and dynamic and inspired and bringing something new and pioneering? And this is the dynamic of this cycle that is at the point that I'm talking to you is just 3 weeks away. And at that point of the 7th of April, we also have this really lovely trine that's capping off that mini grand trine that I was telling you about the first week of April, where we have Venus still retrograde, because she's actually retrograde till the 13th of April. She will station pretty much at this degree in conjunction with Saturn. And that will also be closer to no, is it, yeah, 25 degrees, and that will be closer to when Saturn and the North Node are going to come together as well. But all of this pile up here again, there's loads of these pile ups in Pisces, nice alliteration there. Planetary pile up in Pisces in trine to Mars, that is at 25 degrees. Now we're getting Mars moving into the 26th degree just as we get the nodal axis and Mercury at the 26th, or approaching the 26th degree as well for the nodes, and then for Saturn as well, approaching 26. So this becomes now a whole new story of something I need to work on, I can go forward with. The only element that's missing still now in April is the what do I need to know in terms of my relationships, or in terms of my preferences, my desires, the things that I wish for in terms of the comforts of my life, or the harmony and the beauty of my life. What do I need to know about all those things? So this mini grand trine, the wild card being not only the nodal axis, but of course also Uranus, because we just generally can't predict that, but it's in a very constructive pattern. And here we've got this really phenomenal, quite unusual pattern that's a bucket pattern, and that is created by the nodal axis with the sextiles, this mini grand trine, and then the actual trine that is in between the Pisces planets and Mars in Cancer. At this point also, we're building to another story which requires a whole separate video with Chiron. And Chiron is getting closer and closer to Eris, which is it's only going to happen in May, so we'll talk about that later on. But that's really a very important journey that we're on collectively. It's very rare that Chiron and Eris meet, especially in Aries. Eris has a 500-year synodic cycle, or not synodic cycle, but cycle around the sun. And so she's been in Aries basically for over a century. Everyone alive pretty much has Eris there in Aries. And it really does show us that after all of the inner turbulence and the things that we've been changing and moving towards, we are now going to have something quite empowering, or at least era defining, that is going to cap all of this off through the month of May and into June. Big changes, so which again, as I was saying, require us to be aware of what we're doing and how we're thinking about things. So the Aries solar eclipse I have spoken about in another video, and I will speak again about it. I'll do the sign by sign in a few days' time. And it's going to be very much capping off some of this, or like the peak, let's say, of this energy of what I'm describing about the retrograde cycle. But I want to continue with the Mercury cycle, because then after Mercury is stationing direct, it's activating this, again, planetary pileup that we have with the North Node, which, by the way, as we get into, what is it, the 27th of April? Or is it before? No, on the 25th of April, then the moon is also going to be there. So if I come forward, I'll just jump forward by weeks. That way we can go a little faster. Didn't mean to be taking up so much time in this video, but I get confused because there's so many things going on. So here we have the moon in the mix of the, sorry, no, we have to go back a day. It's the 25th. The moon is in the mix. I have to go back hours because it moves fast and it was supposed to be in the mix. So let's get back till the moon is in Pisces. Hello, moon in Pisces. And the moon is now in the mix of this very important journey through Pisces. And the reason that that's important is because the moon is part of the journey of the eclipses. And whenever the moon comes through those sensitive points, there's an activation. Of course, other planets too. But the moon is the timing device. Sorry, it's the end of a long day. I've been talking a lot. So here we have, for all intents and purposes, the North Node or Rahu with Saturn, with Venus, with the moon. And the moon is about to conjoin Neptune again. And then as we go forward, now I'm going to go day by day, the moon is going to cross over. Went too far. The moon is going to cross over the activation point of the eclipse. And then we get Mercury at the eclipse point. Have I got a chart for that one? No. No, I think I was looking at them by by transit. So I'm just going to go myself hour by hour so we can just find that point, which is the 26th of April, which is an extraordinary day for so many reasons. 9:15, 9:21, 9:24, 27, 30, 32, 35. Okay, at 9 degrees and 35 minutes, we've got Mercury on the 26th of April coming back to the point at which we have the activation, or let's say the shadow. So Mercury went into shadow in March, and then it's now coming out of its shadow the 26th of April. And what this means is it's coming back over the point at which it's stationed retrograde. This retrogradation cycle completes itself only after the planet leaves the point after its retrograde. And so now it's direct, it's taking its third pass over this point and it's moving on. And it was just hours before that the moon rather, did the same, activating the eclipse point. And as I was saying earlier, the activation of an eclipse point is huge. All the more so because at this particular day, on this particular day, the 26th of April, we have not only the moon having activated that point with Mercury having activated the eclipse, but we also have the sun just moving now out of a T-square with the Mars and Pluto opposition. Remember that Mars rules the lunation, it rules Mercury, it rules Neptune, it's still ruling that Chiron and Aries. It rules the place where we've had the eclipse of the 29th of March, and it is extremely important because the rulerships are telling us where the energy needs to go. So at this point now, we've got clarity. There's something we understand, and we're going to move into a new domain. But there's something that requires a big change before we get there. There's something that requires a big adjustment before we can really safely move on into this new thing. At this point, also, we have Venus, who on the 13th of April stationed direct again at 26 degrees. She's not moving fast. Retrograde planets are always slow, and she's still holding her conjunction with Saturn. So it's kind of like saying, we can't really have this thing yet. We have to be serious about what we choose here. We have to be serious about our money, about our values, about how we relate to each other, about what we hold dear before we go into the next thing. And this is the end of April. So this is going to be a really dynamic time where this will be in individual lives, something quite important. If you have, especially for the fixed signs up to, let's say, 6 degrees of whether it be Taurus or Leo or Scorpio or Aquarius, this will be extremely life-changing for you, especially if that's your sun, that's your identity, it's yourself. It can be your career, your sense of your image, um, and especially also if that's a sensitive point like your ascendant or your midheaven and of course the moon as well. So what to say? These are extraordinary times. And then just to finish this up, the thing I wanted to add here is that Venus finally moves beyond that shadow period that she started on the 2nd of March at 10 degrees and 50 minutes. And that only comes in May, the 16th of May. So Venus moves into she moves into Aries on the 2nd of May. I think it's overnight from the 2nd to the 3rd universal time. And then as she keeps moving forward, she will finally clear that that degree point on the 16th. Yeah. So universal time, all of these dates are universal time. That puts her into a trine. So it's nearly 11 degrees. It's 10 degrees 50. I'm not going to fiddle around with the minutes. I've kept you too long. But this is in a trine to an almost 13-degree Mars, who also is well beyond. So if you go back from the Mars opposition to Pluto perspective, by the end of April, we're dealing with something that we were contending with or trying to figure out already at the end of October and beginning of November, and especially around the 4th of November, when there was the first opposition that was from a 29-degree Mars in Cancer to a 29-degree Pluto in Capricorn for the last time. And then Pluto shifted into Aquarius, where it's staying. Mars has done its movement into Leo until the 6th of December, where it's stationed retrograde at 6 degrees of Leo, then went back, and on the 6th of January went backwards into Cancer, where it's only just emerged as of the 26th. So the 26th is an extraordinary, it's a good day, let's say extraordinary. I'm probably using extraordinary too much, but honestly, it really is. Things are not ordinary. Write that date down, circle it, see if you have things planned or you want to achieve things using that energy of something new in a conscious way. It can be very vitalizing for something to change, but it can also be a source of real contention. It can be a challenge. It's a T-square from fixed signs, so it can be something that requires you really pushing your agenda or pushing yourself in a different way, or being ready to be pushed in a way that helps you grow, ideally, ultimately, or that requires you to take a new action based on everything that we have been going through basically since February. So I'm going to leave it there. It's an enormous time, really hard to overstate how huge this time is, but I wish you all well with all the changes that we're going through. And if you want some help with that, then do book reading at the description link below. And I'll be back with the Aries eclipse, if not something before that. And we'll talk about the sign by sign. If you want to know the sign by sign for this particular eclipse, then you can go back and listen to the video that I did 10 days ago or so, something like that, on the Virgo full moon lunar eclipse. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for being here.